Stop me if you have heard this before, but the Pittsburgh Penguins lost in a shootout on Saturday to Columbus, and Pat and I are going to recap that game, plus get you all set for the Penguins versus the Kraken on Monday right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at SendHimForWet. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins, and you can follow the show's Instagram account at LockedOn_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The AFC and NFC championship games are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Pat, once again, the Penguins get a point. They're not able to finish the game in overtime after a flurry of high danger chances. And then they lose in a shootout. The Penguins are now 1-7 in games decided by a shootout this year. We've talked at length about their shootout struggles. We could go probably for 20 minutes about that for today's episode. We're not going to do that, but we will spend at least a little bit of time because it was once again not a pretty sight. Artur Shilov's at least got them through 3 rounds. And it's like, okay, maybe they have a chance to break this curse a little bit more, especially after they won one earlier this season. So it's like, okay, maybe you have a shot to win your second one. Brian Rust comes in the round 4, gets a really bad attempt off, and then Charlie Coyle makes no mistake in round 4, sending the Blue Jackets to get the extra point. They've now won 4 in a row, 3 of which have been under Rick Bowness, the new head coach. But honestly, Pat, it really should not have gotten to that point. I thought the Penguins absolutely dominated 3-on-3 in overtime, and I tweeted this during the game. They have been a lot better in 3-on-3 as of late. They just keep getting goalied, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. Elvis Merzlikins, like I did for Vasilevsky, tip the cap to you, sir. It was at least 4 to 5 high danger chances in that overtime. Ben Kindle, semi-breakaway, makes the save. Tommy Novak, semi-breakaway, makes the save. Kindle, from his stomach, gets it to Malkin, who is literally 10 feet out. Merzlikins, insane save there, Kindle, another insane save. Gino, another one. I think Sid has another chance in that overtime, too. It was crazy save after crazy save, and all you can do is really tip your cap to the goalie. So there's that, but also, Pat, at the same time, we'll get into this in a little bit. You played 2 really good periods. You can't take a period off and expect to win in regulation. You just can't.
That's where I have to start with this, because the shootout problems are indeed a problem. We're not going to bury our heads in the sand and pretend that everything is fine, don't worry about it, because you are leaving points on the table. And if they end up missing the postseason by 1, 2, or 3 points, you're going to look back at these shootout losses, and that's going to be the reason why.
God, if they were 4-4 in shootouts, they'd be 1 point up on the Islanders for second place in the Metro. Those are the differences, man. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly. But at the other end of it, you played an extremely good first period where you were clearly the better team than the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then for another moment this season, they come out in the second period just completely flat, and they just give the game back to Columbus. And then they have to play catch up in the third period, which they do thanks to another elite deflection goal by the captain. And then they do really well in 3-on-3, and Elvis Merzlikins plays outside of his mind and gets it to the shootout. And we know what happens there, which, speaking of, enough with Sidney Crosby, enough with Brian Rust in the shootout. They aren't good at them. Or at the very least, they're in a slump in them. So you need to go to other players. Chinnikov, he's operating at 100% clip for the Pittsburgh Penguins in a shootout. So good on Dan Muse for putting him out there. And then the other thing that needs to be talked about, which I don't know if I'm the only one who caught this or if just it's not getting spoken of, but before the game, they showed an interview after the Blue Jackets' most recent win prior to the Penguins, in an interview with Merzlikins, where they asked him, hey, you've won 3 in a row and now you're off to Pittsburgh. What's the message? And Merzlikins simply says, we're going to Pittsburgh and we're going to win that game too. And he backed it up. He made 29 saves, and a lot of those 29 saves were 10 Bell saves. So he deserves a ton of credit for really leading his team to a victory against one of its biggest rivals. But at the end of the day, you look at this game, and I know everyone's going to be upset about the shootouts, but there's really no excuse for it getting there at all.
Yeah, that's fair. And it honestly reminded me a little bit of the Flyers game where they blitzed the Flyers right off the ice in the first period, just like they were doing with Columbus in that first period. The Flyers really pushed back in the second, just like the Blue Jackets. Difference is, Pat, Blue Jackets actually made them pay, unlike the Flyers, who are continuing to be in a really big slump where they just can't score and a whole bunch of other things. Their goaltending has also been atrocious now that Dan Vladar is out. But the Blue Jackets, they made them pay. The Flyers didn't. The Penguins, they pushed back a bit in the third. I thought they were the better team in that period. They were able to get another 6-on-5 goal. That's something that I do like has been better as of late. They're starting to get much better at 6-on-5s after at the beginning of the season. I felt like that was an area they really needed to fix because they weren't even getting the zone for a lot of these 6-on-5s. Lately, though, they're actually scoring 6-on-5 goals. And I've seen Letang and Crosby hook up for that type of goal probably around 40 times in 20 years. It never gets old watching those two do that. Like Crosby sets up literally right in front of the net, puts his stick down. Letang's like, hey, I'm going to take that opportunity every time. No chance there for Merzlikins. So the Penguins, nice to get a point since Washington also lost in regulation to Florida. Penguins still a point up for third in the Metro. But again, these drop points, they're becoming a killer, man, because that's 7 dropped points to shootouts. As I said, if you were 4-4, Pat, that's 3 extra points in the standings, and you're 4 points up on Washington, and you're 1 point up on the Islanders. And oh, by the way, you have games in hand on both teams when you look at the standings overall. So again, sometimes those are the fine margins between getting in versus not, because as of right now, man, I think the only way they might get in is top 3 in the Metro. The Atlantic is very competitive this year, way more than the Metro, honestly. And I think the Atlantic, is probably going to get 5 teams in the playoffs. So it just makes that playoff race ever so tighter going into, the end of this month, the Olympic break, March, where it's obviously going to be nuts, all that. So you can't be taking periods off because, again, with Columbus, they made you pay where the Flyers didn't.
Right. The good news is that they are playing extremely well in division. They're getting points and wins out of their divisional matchups. So with how tight both the Atlantic and the Metropolitan Division are, they're putting themselves in a position where if tiebreakers come into play, they're in a solid spot. But at the end of the day, they've got to just start finishing the job. One other observation I had from Saturday's game against the Blue Jackets, and I was wrong on the prediction, but right on the analysis. I loved Evgeny Malkin's game on Saturday. That was a borderline vintage Malkin performance. He was all over the ice. He was buzzing all game long. It just sucks that he didn't get rewarded with a goal because I said it was only a matter of time before he put one in the net. But Malkin played himself one hell of a game, just didn't get rewarded for it. And I do have to give credit, despite the shootout, to Artur Shilovs. I thought he did a really good job holding the fort in the second period, despite giving up 2 goals. And then for the rest of the game, keeping them in a position to win. Shilovs and Skinner are continuing to make Dan Muse's job really difficult because every time it feels like one of them is starting to pull away and becoming the 1A, the other punches back and has a really good performance. So as much as I know people say they want, and I was one of them, wants to see Stuart Skinner take over the 1A, Shilovs keeps making his case, and so does Skinner. So at this point, I think it's going to have to be post-Olympic break that Muse and the coaching staff decide who they're going to put the saddle on if this team's going to make a run at the playoffs. But right now, both goalies are making a solid case to be the 1A.
See, I'm going to push back a little bit because I didn't like the goal that Shilovs gave up to Zach Aston-Reese. I felt like he could have been better with that one.
It was a blocked shot that bounced out, so I don't think he was quite ready for it. But yeah. I agree that he didn't react quickly enough. But at the same time,
I didn't like his reaction time. The other two, I'm not really going to put a lot of blame on him. His shootout struggles are what they are. We've talked about them at length on the show. Dan Muse has been asked about if he's going to replace him in the shootout. He keeps saying, no, that's not going to happen. So for anyone out there that wants that to happen, I don't think you're going to get your wish. You're just going to keep riding with Shelovs when he starts. It is funny though, Pat, with almost all of these shootouts, it is Shelovs in net. It's never the other goalie, even though they have the goalie rotation 50-50. It's always Shelovs in these games, even when Tristan Jarry was still here. Just very odd. But yeah, I felt like, again, he could have been a little bit better at the start, but I will give him credit again. He made some big saves in the third, and that save in overtime on Charlie Coyle was also really big as well. So he's coming up clutch in those situations, but it goes back to what I said before. I just want to see that same consistency at the start of the games. That's all. That's all I'm saying. That's why I think I'd still rather Skinner get a little bit of the 1A starts, but that's me. I think Skinner's going to get the start today if they keep the goalie rotation. I thought Connor Clifton played perhaps his best game as a Penguin. That was an absolute piss missile for his first goal as a Penguin. I thought he was very physical once again. I thought he was also moving the puck well from his own zone up the ice. Just a really solid game from him. I've actually kind of liked the way he's played his last 2 to 3-ish games. So thought that game was his best as a Penguin, even though you and I have said on the show we haven't been that big of fans of his performances this year, but I think as of late, he is playing a bit better. So we do have to be fair and give credit where it's due. Rickard Rakell was good. Sidney Crosby with that outrageous pass to him. Ho-hum. Chris Letang, man, he was also fantastic. But once again, he continues to play lights out with Erik Karlsson hurt. And speaking of that, Pat, probably not too much longer until Karlsson is back. I was at practice on Sunday. He was out there, no contact jersey, going on the trip. I expect him to play at some point on this trip, in my opinion. But Letang, man, he's also been fantastic. Those were some of my other standouts from Saturday's game.
That'd be a huge lift to get him back because they have done a really good job as of late keeping the ship afloat without him, because we talked about it. Losing him is a huge loss with how well he has played this season and how much of a factor he has been in this team's unexpected success. But Letang deserves all the credit right now because he has elevated his game to a level we haven't seen in quite some time. And that's all credit to him. He's getting the opportunity. He's seizing it. And if you can get Karlsson back sometime in the next week and Letang can keep this level of play up, it only bodes well for this team moving forward.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. If Letang really keeps this up when Karlsson comes back and he does his thing, all of a sudden you have two very viable pairs for the rest of the season, because I think Letang has been lights out for the last couple of weeks ever since the calendar flipped to 2026. I just want to see if he keeps it up. We know how great Karlsson's been for most of the season, especially offensively. Now that Letang is really, filling in offensively and he's been better in his own zone too, that would be huge for this team, man, if both players are really humming at the same time. But I think that's going to do it for this segment, of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We're not ending the episode after only 14 minutes today, people. We still have a big preview to get to. And speaking of that, Pat and I are going to give our thoughts on today's game against the Seattle Kraken coming up right after this. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our first sponsor, which is FanDuel. The NFC and AFC championship games are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you will see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts also lean you into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts also give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs keep rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. That's my good friend and co-host, Pat Stamp. And Pat, Penguins Kraken comes your way today at 5 o'clock Eastern time from Seattle, the first game of a 4-game road trip for the Penguins as they will go to Western Canada. After this one, the Penguins flew out to Seattle after practice yesterday, and they will take on a Kraken team that is also just flat out weird. And I don't really think the Kraken are that good, honestly. Yes, I know they are third place in the Pacific right now. That's not really a high bar considering how weak the Pacific is this year. They are in a pretty big tie for third place. San Jose also has 51 points. So does Anaheim, and so does LA. Seattle this year, 21-17-9. They have lost 3 in a row. They've won 5 of their last 10 games, so 500 during that time, but still, they have lost 3 in a row. Penguins, I felt like they outplayed them in their first matchup this year. Lost in overtime after, I'll bring it back to something I said earlier. Penguins dominated that 3-on-3, basically had the entire puck. Seattle's first chance they get that goes in the back of the net. Just really awful luck there. That was one of the games that Sergei Murashov started earlier this year. I felt like he really wanted that overtime goal back. Just wasn't that good of a goal to give up. But the Penguins, they'll have another shot at the Seattle team today. And this is a Seattle team that, offense, it's been hard to come by for a lot of these guys this year. I mean, the players that have the most points, Jordan Eberle and Matty Beniers, only 31 points in 45 and 47 games each. So again, offense, this is the type of game where I really want to see the Penguins play well defensively, because again, the Kraken, it just hasn't been their strong suit this year, offense. That is. Chandler Stevenson has 13 goals and 29 points. Vince Dunn has 6 goals and 29 points. Jared McCann, old Penguin, of course, has 10 goals in 23 games. Brandon Montour has 6 goals and 17 points. But again, man, the biggest guy is Jordan Eberle, who's been a Penguin killer, Matty Beniers, who has 31 points. This is a team that has been struggling to score throughout the year. So I do want to see if the Penguins can kind of take advantage of that.
Yeah, let's put it this way. The Seattle Kraken and all the other teams that you listed that are in a fight for that spot in third in the Pacific Division, they would all be behind the Philadelphia Flyers in the Metropolitan Division. They would all be somewhere between 6th or 5th and even lower in the standings in the Metropolitan Division, because the Pacific is incredibly weak this year. It's pretty much, you look at the Pacific Division, it's Vegas, Edmonton, and then everybody else. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't let them being in third in their division tell you anything different than that. But I also look at this. This is going to be, funny enough, I bring up the standings in the Metropolitan Division. This is going to be a very similar game to what you saw against Columbus. This is a team that is both coached and built to play 200 feet. They're not going to sell out for offense. They're going to be more defensive than they are offensive. That has kind of been the hallmark of the Seattle Kraken since they entered the league a few years ago. So at the end of the day, for the Penguins, you really just have to play a similar game that you did on Saturday without taking off a period, because you're going to have the talent, you're going to have the depth, and you'll likely have the speed to take it to this Seattle team. And that's pretty much what you have to do for 60 minutes. The other issue that they're going to run into is when you look at Seattle this year. Last year, the problem was they had one goalie in Joey Decord who was really good, and then they had one goalie in Grubauer who was really bad. That has since rebounded. Both of them have save percentages over 900. Both of them have played really well. Before he got hurt once again, Matt Murray was even playing really well for them. So the idea that the Kraken have of wanting to play a complete, more defensively responsible game was hinged on getting good goaltending. The past couple years, they haven't really gotten it. This year, they have got it. So their issue is they can't score, but they also don't give up a ton of goals, or at the very least, they don't score enough to make it look like it. Because if you look at them in the standings right now, they're in third place in the Pacific with a -11. But at the end of the day, they've scored 130 goals and given up 141. So it's pretty tight. The issue is that they can't score.
Yeah, they ranked 25th in the NHL among all teams in goals per game this season at 2.74. If you look at a little bit of their underlying numbers this year, they rank 31st in the league in expected goal share. So not only can they not score, Pat, they're even having trouble generating good goal scoring chances. 45.3% expected goal share at 5-on-5. Only the Chicago Blackhawks are worse than them in that category per money puck. So again, Offense has been very hard to come by for this team. So if the Penguins can kind of replicate some of their good defensive performances that they've had lately, again, like against Detroit, for example, against Carolina, for example, I think they can be in good shape for this game. You did mention it though, for their goaltending. Their goaltending has been very good throughout the year. In 28 games for Joey Daccord, 12-11-5, 902 save percentage. Philip Grubauer in 18 games, 916 with a 2.46 goals against average. And even, you said it for Matt Murray, he's played in 5 games, and even he has had a 922 save percentage this year. They have a combined team save percentage at all situations, Pat, 908. So when, doesn't matter who's been in net for them, they've gotten some really good goaltending. So that has been a big key as to why they've been able to stay in the playoff race, despite offense being hard to come by for this team a lot this year.
Yeah, it's been a big improvement for Seattle. If like I said, if the goal scoring can start to match the goal prevention, I don't think it's a team that's going to go on any sort of run. Let's not get carried away, but it's a team that could and should be in the mix if they can start finding some goals. So if you're the Penguins, you got to hope that trend continues against Seattle today. Other thing that we should mention that we don't want to forget here, big milestone game for the captain coming up today. This is game number 1400 in the NHL for Sidney Crosby. Really, really great article on the NHL website from my old high school newspaper classmate, Wes Crosby, about the captain's 1400th game. A lot of good stuff in there, but we would be remiss, and I know we've said it a billion, cajillion, a trillion, whatever number you want to put on it times. Absolutely incredible that at age 38, Sidney Crosby is still playing at this elite of a level. And for the Penguins to really get where they want to go, he's got to keep that going.
Agreed. And I do want to see the power play be a bit better. I'll try to work that voodoo magic that I had going into the Flyers game. I felt like the power play was looking a little bit clunky. Goes out there against the Flyers, lights them up. You and I look good for that. Against Columbus, thought it looked a little bit clunky again. Now, let's see if they go out there and light up Seattle's penalty kill in this one. So I'm going to try to go 2 for 2 with that one. Again, I assume it's going to be Stuart Skinner for this one, and he's been playing very well. I think this is a good matchup for him, considering Seattle's offensive struggles. And even when you look at some of their recent games, Pat, in their schedule, they've also lost 5 out of their last 6 games. In 4 of those games, they have been held to 2 or fewer goals. Again, that just goes in line with what we've been saying this entire segment. So very winnable game for the Penguins, just like the last one was. Let's see if the Penguins can get the 2 points and start out this road trip on a good note, because this is a big trip in general. And speaking of that, Pat and I are going to discuss the rest of this trip coming up in the final segment right after this. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our final sponsor, which is Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posting on other websites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, I would go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed's sponsored jobs help your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show, you will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. That's my good friend and co-host, Patrick Damp. And Pat, this is a big 4-game trip, man. 3 of these 4 teams are honestly not very good. And yeah, I know they lost to Calgary already. They lost to Seattle already, but I still don't think those two teams are very good. Calgary also just traded their best defenseman, Rasmus Anderson, to Vegas. I actually do like that trade quite a bit for Vegas. They're going all in once again. I still think the return is totally fine for Calgary. I think they did as well as they could have for Anderson, but I still like that trade a lot for Vegas as well. But that's a Calgary team that's honestly low-key giving up on the season. So you have them, Seattle, who again, they've lost 3 in a row, 5 of their last 6 games. Vancouver, you've already beaten once, and they are in free fall right now, Pat. I mean, this is an awful team that I think virtually everyone is available on the Canucks this year. They've already traded Quinn Hughes. I think Elias Pettersson's going to be available via trade. Connor Garland, Kiefer Sherwood. I don't think they have any untouchables on that team, and nor should they, because they're in a pretty big rebuild right now. The biggest game, obviously, is going to be Edmonton. Time will tell if the Penguins will see the Oilers without Leon Draisaitl. Remember, he is dealing with a family thing over in Germany, so all the best to him dealing with that situation. We don't know if he's going to be back in time this week. If he's not, obviously that's a huge loss for the Oilers, considering how great he is overall, how much he does for that team. But this is a massive trip, considering the opportunity there for the points to get, and also just with teams really chasing you. I want to really see them put together a lot of 60-minute performances against teams that, again, are flat out not very good outside of Edmonton. Even though Seattle is technically in third place for a tie, Pat, as I've said, they're not very good. Edmonton is going to be the toughest game. I think if you can get 5 out of 8 points here to around 6, I think you're doing pretty well. I'll even settle for maybe 4, but I'd like to get 5+ on this trip.
To me, 5 has to be the floor.
Yeah.
You have to get 5 points out of these 4 games, because you said it. Seattle, I already went over it. They're in third place, but they're in the weakest division in the NHL, so it's not that difficult for them to get into that spot. Calgary, I look back at the Calgary game, and it was a combination of self-inflicted wounds and just a lack of energy. You can make up for both of those against Calgary, especially after they trade their best defenseman and essentially wave the white flag on the season. But that's kind of going to be the theme of these last 2 weeks of January for the Penguins. You look at who they're playing. Edmonton's the only team that has any sort of aspirations right now. You have Calgary, who we talked about, Seattle, who we talked about. Vancouver is miles away the worst team in the NHL this year. A putrid 37 points. The team that's the closest to them is Winnipeg with 44. So they are in complete free fall. They are just the bottom of the barrel. You lose that game, unless it happens on a fluky bounce or they have...
Vancouver has lost 10 in a row right now. They still have a few more games to get to before they play the Penguins, Pat. They'll have a chance to break that against the Islanders, Capitals, or the Devils. So there's also a chance they could be on a 13-game losing streak, but we'll see.
But
they're bad.
The only way a loss against Vancouver would be acceptable is if you're on a 3-game winning streak going in and you're just at the end of your rope on a Western swing. And even then, if it's a hard-fought one, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, especially if you get 6 points going into it and you're just at the end of a Western swing, because we've seen that happen to even great teams where they get to the end of the Western road trip and they're just completely gassed. But that's a discussion for next week, so we'll leave that for now. But then you get into the end of the month, you've got Chicago, who they surprised, but injuries really derailed their effort this year, and they're still not very good. And then you got the Rangers, who we talked about, told their fans, this season's done.
Yeah.
We're done with this season. We're not worried about this year. So that's another team over these next 2 weeks. You're playing teams that are out of it or about to be out of it. So you got to get these wins. Edmonton, I'll say this much about this game, along with them still being good and still and even if you don't have Draisaitl, you still got Connor McDavid, who is the super weapon. It's also the second game of a back-to-back. You're going right from Calgary to Edmonton. So that's going to be a difficult lift for this team, but it starts with Seattle. I want to see a win today against them. Calgary, you got to make up for the mistakes you made when you played them a couple of weeks ago. Edmonton, I'll 50-50 coin flip that one because it's the second of a back-to-back. Vancouver, here's the thing I will say. you're going to get 2 days off before you go to Vancouver. So I'm going to actually rescind what I said. You got 2 days off in Western Canada. You're not going to have a time zone switch. You're not going to have a ton of travel days. You're going to be able to get acclimated. It's a bad team. You're playing them in the evening. You should probably get those 2 points, but I'll end it where I started it. To me, 5 points is the floor.
That's fair. And honestly, I wouldn't even chalk up Edmonton to 50-50. I'll disagree with you there. The Oilers have just been a matchup nightmare for this team over the last few years. So I think the Penguins are a pretty hefty underdog going into that game.
Oh, I don't mean in terms of odds. I mean in terms
okay.
of can or should they get a win. You're playing the second half of a back-to-back. So if they go into it 2-0 and it's the second half of a back-to-back and they lose it, I'm not going to lose sleep.
Same.
But
Okay.
if they are in desperate need of a win, then that's going to be a really difficult place to get one.
Yeah, that part is fair. Yes. If you can win those first two and say you drop a game to Edmonton, but then you finish off the road trip with a win in Vancouver, that's still a very big success. You go 3-1 on that trip, 6 out of 8 points. You're looking pretty good heading back home to play a not very good Chicago team and then a Rangers team that you said that they once again sent a letter to their fans saying if this is going to be a retool, not a rebuild. Good luck with the retool, by the way, with that roster. I don't think Chris Drury is going to do a really good job with that. And then you also go into the Olympic break. You have 3 more games after that, Pat. Ottawa, one of them. That's going to be a huge game. A game on the island against the Islanders. That's another 4-point game. That's going to arguably be their biggest game of the season, early February. And then they have Buffalo, another big game. So after this month, they'll have 3 huge games to start February before that long Olympic break. And then you have the end of the month and then crazy March coming up with games basically every other day, back-to-backs out the wazoo too. You're playing some really good teams in that month. It's not going to slow down for the rest of the season. So if you have a good road trip, and I know, breaking news here, it'll pay huge dividends. If you have the opposite, well, you know what I'm going to say for that. But
yeah, that's the biggest thing is at the end of the day, you got to have a big road trip here. It's not going to be the make or break, but it's really going to help decide the direction that this season's going to go.
Yeah.
Because you brought up post-Olympic break. I mean, you look at the March calendar, there is one single time in that month that they have 2 days off, and it's the 19th and the 20th. Other than that, they are playing every other day. And there's a long road trip in there. There's a couple of homestands. So if you can put yourself in a position coming out of this road trip to still be in the mix for the top 3 in the Metro, you're making some distance between you. You're putting some distance between you and the teams that are chasing you. It sets you up to have a little bit of a cushion going into the post-Olympic break schedule, but it also puts you in a position to where you can really solidify yourself as a playoff team going into the post-Olympic schedule.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with a fresh episode for you guys on Tuesday, breaking down this game against the Kraken. And then Wednesday, we'll get you all set for Calgary. Same thing on Thursday for Edmonton. And then on Friday, we'll recap that game against Edmonton. And of course, get you all set for the final game in the road trip against Vancouver over the weekend. But again, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with a fresh episode for you guys on Tuesday.